Hi, everybody. My name is Noah Cowan. I'm the artistic director here at TIFF Bell Lightbox.
Can I buy that?
Welcome to our artist talk for this year here in the Blackberry Lounge. Last year we had Guy Madden come up and talk about hauntings. This year we have very special guests. Please welcome James Franco and Gus Van Sant. They're here to talk about a piece that's actually in our atrium lobby called Memories of Idaho that has a really interesting start. I believe it began on the set of Milk, where James Franco starred in, we gave a wonderful performance in Gus Van Sant's film of the same name, and started talking about, I think, one of the seminal films of the American independent movement, My Own Private Idaho. On that note, I think I'll turn it over. James, do you want to walk us through the early conversations you had with Gus and how the project came about?
Yeah, so when I was in junior high and high school, my favorite film, and probably still my favorite film, was My Own Private Idaho. It was, if I think back, it was really kind of the first film that, I don't know, hit me in a way that I felt like I needed repeated viewings of the movie, so I'd go to the local video store and rent it on VHS and watch it over and over. And it was before I got into acting, before I even knew that filmmaking was a possibility for me. So it was just something about the movie, the aesthetic, the themes, I guess the idea of a makeshift family, River's incredible performance. I love the aesthetic, the set design, the way Gus shot it, and even the clothes. I remember at the time I'd try and dress like River and his character, and so I loved it. And then years down the road, I got into acting and eventually met Gus, and we met. I can't remember. I met Gus in he was living in New York for a period, and I remember it was around the time when you were thinking about doing that book, Sarah. Oh.
Yeah. Talking to the mic.
Oh. I thought you moved it down because I was talking too loudly.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. So then I met Gus, and then we met when you were getting ready to make Last Days, and I guess all I would ask you about was My Own Private Idaho, right? For years, that was all I would ask you about.
I wasn't aware of that. I didn't notice. Was your
really?
agent Chris?
What's that?
Who was your agent at that time? Chris Andrews?
No.
So I think that we met because you were, there was just a general meeting.
Yeah.
And then, but also we met through a friend, Ben Neidhart's.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw I saw a play that James had written, The Ape.
Yeah.
The Ape, and what was the other one?
Fool's Gold.
Fool's Gold. And he was performing it, and he had written it, and we sort of knew each other a little bit. During that period, I was making Psycho. And then we lost touch, but then the next time I think we saw each other was for Milk in 2007 when we were casting. And that was when we had our meeting, conspicuously, James we were talking nothing about Milk, Harvey Milk, or the project. It was all about My Own Private Idaho.
Right.
Which was fine.
I'm sure I asked you about it before, but yes, I asked you about it then. And then we did a bunch of premieres for Milk. We did San Francisco, LA, New York, and then I guess you couldn't get any of the other actors out to this special premiere in Portland. And so Gus enticed me to go to Portland by saying he'd give me a tour of all the locations that where he shot My Own Private Idaho, right?
Yeah, with Scott.
With Scott Green, who has a part in My Own Private Idaho. He's in the cafe scene in those kind of interview section, and has worked with Gus for, I guess, years now. And so we went on the tour. And then at the end of the tour, Gus said that he had all the dailies from My Own Private Idaho, or I guess more specifically, the editor's reels. Gus shot it in 1990, and it came out in 91. And so it had been cut on film on a Steenbeck. And so when Gus said he had the dailies, that meant he had hundreds of these rolls of film. And I said, well, we have to watch it. And so I made a special trip back to Portland and we spent 2 days just watching all the material. And then I asked if no, then we just started talking about, this is the way I remember it. We started talking about kind of how you direct movies differently now, like that with Jerry and Elephant and Last Days, you know, there was a real shift in the way that you were making movies, and so we started talking about what if you had cut
like
this
even
movie
though
down.
even though the takes that I was using in Jerry or Last Days or Elephant were done as specifically long pieces of film, that we'd actually shot the other movies with long takes, like My Own Private Idaho. Any given scene, each shot, it runs the whole length of the scene. It's just cut. There's 4 or 5 shots that cut between each other, but you could have just decided on one take and actually edited it that way with longer pieces. And same with like Good Will Hunting or like any of the films actually. So, but since we had the film sitting there, it was, I think I did say it would be cool to put it together without any cuts.
Right. So, but then it was on film, and you said, well, it's great, you know, it's a great idea, but it costs, you know, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to digitize it, right?
Right.
And
I said like 60,000 or something.
Well, we ended up
more.
getting a good deal, right? I mean, we got it sponsored by Gucci, and so we got it transferred, and then I humbly asked Gus if I could, you know, have my own copy of the material, and that I would cut something together, but if he didn't like it, I would never show anybody. And I guess Gus thought it would be bad, and that I would never show anybody, but.
Yeah, I assumed it would be interesting because it took us like 6 months to cut the film together, and James was going to do it like in a month, and by himself.
So this is the My Own Private River piece, right?
Yeah,
Which
What's
was
showing downstairs,
one of
right?
the 2 projections downstairs.
But now, so Gus, now we have, in addition to My Own Private River, we have a piece that we've called Idaho, which we shot on 8mm. And correct me if I'm wrong, Gus. When Gus made his version of My Own Private Idaho, it was his script was a compilation of 3 separate scripts that he had cut and pasted sections of to make My Own Private Idaho. One that was primarily material that was using Shakespeare in a contemporary setting, kind of inspired by Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight. One that was kind of about street kids in Portland, or kind of about a relationship between a street kid and Udo Kier's character, right? And then one that was about these 2 Chicano kids, one of whom was looking for his parents. And then Gus, you know, took sections of all of those, and you can see, you know, if you know My Own Private Idaho, you can see, oh yeah, I see that's from that script and that's from that script. So Gus gave me 2 of those original 3 scripts, and we, one was just it was actually just a treatment. It was called My Own Private Idaho. The other one was called In a Blue Funk, and we turned it into script form, and then shot it on 8mm, using Yvette's great son, Milan, and his friend Sage, and then also Udo Kier, again, reprising his role of Hans. And it's on 8mm because, we didn't want to, you know, we wanted to make it clear that it wasn't like it's not a film for, you know, like wide theatrical release. It's a different kind of project. It's not supposed to kind of compete with My Own Private Idaho. It's supposed to feel kind of like an embryo for what Gus did with My Own Private Idaho, or almost like it's like a study of where My Own Private Idaho came from.
Yeah, you also used the term ghosts, I think, to talk about both of the film projects. It's kind of interesting reflection.
Well, I think for me, they're a different kind of project. Yes, they use film, but they're trying to use film in a different way. when you release a film in commercial theaters, you know, they call it the film business for a reason. You have to, you know, your investors want to make their money back. You have there's a certain kind of pressure to entertain. You know, when an audience goes into a theater, they want to be entertained. They want to be pulled into a story. And Gus had already, you know, done that with his, you know, incredibly innovative movie, My Own Private Idaho. But now, using the material 20 years later, we don't have that same kind of pressure. And so I wanted these projects to be presented, you know, in spaces like this, so that it's clear that it's a different kind of project. It's not trying to do what Gus already did it. He made a great, innovative, you know, cutting edge film, but that was also, you know, entertaining and could be released in theatrical, you know, in theaters. But these movies are trying to do something different.
Absolutely. Gus, this installation also includes photographs of yours, collaged photographs, which also relate to the milieu of My Own Private Idaho. Can you just walk us through how those photographs came about and what they are?
They're pretty unrelated to My Own Private Idaho, but some of them were taken during that period where we were casting, and the original photographs that were then like used for a collage were actually they were casting photographs that I used Polaroid camera to just remember who I had seen when I was casting. And then recently there was a show in Portland where I had taken the photographs and sort of cut them out and made a collage of usually two different people at a time, you know, just combining two different people into one person. So there's sort of like these Frankenstein-like creations. And they're basically unrelated to the movie.
It's interesting, although it does seem to sort of revolve around the idea of memory in a way, sort of having these identities sort of combine as things seem to, as you sort of look to your past a little bit, or is that fair?
Yeah, I think you could say that. Yeah.
So this installation has had a bit of a life so far. I think it began around the time you were hosting the Oscars, James, in Los Angeles at Gagosian.
Yeah.
And My Own Private River also had a screening at PS1 a little while ago. How's the project developed, and do you see it actually developing from here?
Well, I mean, if Gus lets us keep going, I mean, there's another script he gave me. In a blue funk. So there's stuff we could do with that, but we've been asked to show it in several places, so I'm happy to continue to show it in this kind of context. I think it works, and to me, it's, you know, because the film, you know, the original film was so important to me. I just feel like it's material that I would have wanted to see, and it's a project that, you know, I would, you know, love to go see if if I hadn't been involved in it. So I'd love to just continue to show it. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'd love to actually talk to both of you a little bit about this sort of like overall relationship of, you know, your practice as filmmakers and your practice as visual artists, because both of you have a real engagement and interest in that area. Maybe starting with you, Gus, this is something maybe a lot of people don't know because you're so well known as a film director, but I know you engage in visual arts projects on an ongoing basis. How does that work for you? Is it sort of is it sort of taking a break from either thing? Does it refresh your mind, create new sources of inspiration?
To work in visual art?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it was the visual, the paintings that were at Gagosian were really a sort of idea that came up during the talks with the Gagosian Gallery, and I was there really because James had known some of them, had known the Gagosian Gallery, right? And James is very like connected to the art, you know, international art world. No?
Yeah.
And I mean, even when we were in England, like doing Milk, we were going on art tours and meeting artists and so forth. So I happened to be along for the ride, basically, as the, you know, originator of the material that he was cutting together. And in in the process, somebody mentioned the Polaroids that I had taken as maybe artwork that we could put up as well. And because it was a gallery, they were looking for something that might sell as art, you know.
Okay.
So, and I was originally a painter when I was in college and high school. So, like for many, many years, I've been sort of waiting for the moment when I would actually make some more paintings. So it was kind of my cue, and a big opportunity because the Gagosian Gallery in LA was, you know, very visible. So I made a bunch of watercolors that were about 4 feet by 5 feet big, and hung in the gallery across from where My Own Private River was showing.
And so you hadn't painted in the interim?
Just little like gifts and things for people.
Okay.
But I mean, Gus went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and he started as a painting major, and so part of the way I see, you know, this project is it's kind of a fusion of early kind of Gus and later Gus, in the sense that it's material that, you know, comes from his third theatrical release. But it's, you know, I was trying to cut it in such a way that it's reflective of the way Gus, you know, was making some of his more recent movies. And so I saw the paintings as kind of a return to, you know, Gus of that time, or from an earlier time. And there were also, you know, just motifs in that movie that carry over from when Gus was an early painter. He told me that when he was in school, he'd do these paintings of weird objects floating in the sky, I guess cowboy hats and houses and animal cows and stuff. And so you can see how some of that kind of transferred over to Drugstore Cowboy. There are montage sequences where those things are actually physically flying through the sky. And then in My Own Private Idaho, there's a scene where this barn crashes on the road. And that all I see coming directly out of Gus's painting. And so having Gus return to painting, I think, is returning to a lot of those roots.
James, do you want to just elucidate us a little bit on your sort of toggle between these, you know, often very big films, sometimes great independent films, and this continuing art practice of yours, and what meaning that has for you in your life?
Well, I've worked in professional film as a professional actor for 15 years, and in the film industry, you know, it's a certain kind of product. Yeah, there are all different kinds of movies, and there's big movies and independent films, and they're, you know, slightly different. But when you release a movie for a theater, there are just certain kinds of expectations, and you can defy those expectations. But there's still kind of this idea of what a movie is in the theater, but then there's the art world, and there are artists, you know, like somebody that I also just worked with, Douglas Gordon, who, you know, maybe will use film as a medium, but not, you know, make a film in like a narrative commercial film in the same way that we, you know, imagine most of the films playing at a festival like this. And so for me, a project like this is a way to maybe start to bridge both of those worlds, where I can say, I know what my job is as a professional actor. When I'm making a movie called Oz right now in Detroit. I'm actually going to drive back right tonight in the middle of the night and go work tomorrow at 5 a.m. But I know what my job is there. It's to deliver a character as part of a story, and to help make that world believable, whatever that world might be, whether it's the world of, you know, San Francisco in the 70s and Milk, or, you know, this fantastical world. It's to make the audience, you know, engaged with that world and those characters. And it's not that's not the space to go in and examine what film is, or to break it up. I'm not going to go on to step on the set of Oz and say, hey, you know, Sam Raimi, I have this idea. Maybe I'm going to break out a character here and like start talking to the audience or something. That's not the place to do it. But with a project like this, you can start examining, you know, the fabric of film, or what it means to be a film, or start to break up the narrative, or to do projects that don't necessarily have to fall in line with what those expectations are. And, you know, partly because, you know, I think we can do a project like this, like My Own Private River, which is, you know, much more spare. It does have a narrative, it does have an arc, but even if it does have spaces where it doesn't quite come together, it still has the original film to kind of depend on. And so it's this, in that sense, it is kind of like a ghost. It's its own thing, but it's also in conversation with the original. And so that's why that's kind of what these projects are about. It's a way of using film material, but to kind of slightly different ends.
And do you when you return from a sort of a major art project back into your role as a professional actor, does it feed you somehow? Does it actually change the way you act? Or are they very separate?
No, I mean, it always depends like on the project. Like I said, I mean, going and doing Oz, that's not the arena to like say, I'm gonna start acting like, you know, with a German accent or something. You know, that is a specific role. That's my job. I've been hired to play the wizard, and that entails, you know,
being a wizard.
I mean, Sam has certain ideas about what that is, so it's not about bringing it into that world, but to have, you know, this kind of more installation style project in a film festival is great, because it's not one thing or another. It's a film that you can sit and watch the entirety of, or not, and or just let the concept kind of sit in your mind that, oh, it's another film made from material that was intended for a different film. And so conceptually, that's very interesting. So it's nice to have the project here in this way, because it kind of bridges both.
It's fantastic. I think I'm going to open up for questions, and just to sort of like make it a bit more orderly, I'm going to start like on this side of the room. So if there's anyone here who has anything they want to ask James and Gus, let me know. Yes, in the back. So the question was, by revisiting this material 20 years on, do you feel as though it's actually shifted? It's sort of, I guess, just to paraphrase you, like its own integrity has changed in the 20 years in terms of its aesthetic meanings?
Well, maybe I could ask Gus this, like what, I guess you'd maybe watched some of that material, some of it when you did the Criterion edition of My Own Private Idaho, but you probably didn't watch as much as we watched in those 2 days. So was it weird to watch some of that stuff, or because I heard stories about all of it?
For me, it was pretty much the same. As just brings you back, because when you're making it, you're watching it very carefully. So I've seen all the footage, but I forgot about it. So I think all it did was remind me that it existed, because James uses a lot of things that aren't in the final project. Specifically, like all the street life, and I'd forgotten that it existed. But when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, like this character, or the kids with the boombox. I remember, you know, it comes back because you've watched it all. There were things that like we couldn't put everything into the movie. There's a scene where River walks through a grocery store and picks up some bread and doesn't pay for it. He doesn't like leave it there. But it was just a thing that happened. Maybe I think it might have been in the script. I can't remember whether we just.
I don't think that was in the script.
It was
actually. I think that was like the shot where we first. It's the shot where River walks into a grocery store and it just follows him, and it looked like you guys just decided, hey, let's just have the character go and buy some. He just got some money. Let's have him go buy some food.
Yeah, I think we might have just added it on the fly, but we did organize it enough because the the teller that supposedly is taking the money is the teller that I used to have at my Safeway, and she didn't work at that Safeway. She worked.
Really?
We got it together to bring her over.
Okay.
So there was some planning, but it might have been done like just as we went. I'm not positive.
Well, I mean, I don't. The people in the store were definitely not extras. There was a real
right.
shoppers.
They were regular people, but there are things like that that we didn't have time for in the finished movie because of just time.
Right.
And balancing everything. But it was only a 70-page script, but the rough cut was like 3 hours or something.
It's interesting. Just it's sort of like a supplementary to that question. Was there like any kind of emotion that was raised actually coming back to this? Because I know you were very friendly with River Phoenix. You know, he's obviously a really inspirational force for you, James. So, just kind of curious about like what kind of emotions returning this material kind of conjured up in you both. Do you want to start, Gus?
I don't know. I feel like I've lived with it close enough through the years that it wasn't like going back to something that was super old, you know. And it's been 20 years now. It sort of reminded me of a lot of things, like I said before. But it was.
Remind me, Gus. You said like when the material was digitized and then you sent it to me. You said something like, what do you say? Like, it's gonna be a weird experience when you see it like actually in Final Cut, like that material. Like, what did you say? Like,
I don't remember that part. What?
Well, I just remember it was such an odd moment for me to have this movie that had such a big influence on me, I think probably as a person and as an actor and everything, suddenly in my computer in Final Cut. I mean, that was, I don't know, there's nothing, I've never had an experience like that. To
It's like having a film that you'd seen as a film, all of a sudden you have all the dailies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be weird. I mean, I had that experience before because we had all the dailies before.
Yeah.
But if it was, maybe if it was Spider-Man and I had all the dailies,
Yeah.
it might be strange.
That could be cool.
Maybe.
Ask Sam.
Sam.
Is there any questions on this side of the room? Yes, ma'am. We can do all that stuff after. Let's just do questions for now if we could, please. Yes, Eve. I'm going to repeat the question. So the question from Eve Sussman, by the way, who has a fabulous piece in Future Projections, White on White Algorithmic Noir at the NFB until 5 o'clock today. That's the pitch. Asked the motivation for making My Own Private River is pretty clear from the material. What about the second film? What about Idaho?
I think, I'm just plain obsessed with, My Own Private Idaho. So to have like an early version of it was, and to explore that was just, something that I'd be drawn to do. But one of the things that I found, especially after the PS1 installation, which was not just a projection of the film, but there were two exhibition spaces on either side of the screening room. And on one side we had the early influences on Gus Van Sant. So, or at least what I thought were influences, or what he told me were influences. So things, and especially on this film, so things like Paris, Texas, and Strozek by Werner Herzog, and Orson Welles' film Chimes at Midnight, which is kind of a compilation of all the Falstaff material from the Henry IV plays, and then on the other side we had kind of later influences, and while making Milk, Gus had talked to me a lot, or we talked a lot about like Bellatar's films or Jean Dielman, and so I started to see like, wow, Idaho is kind of a compilation of 3 scripts, but then that goes back to like Orson Welles, who's then going back to Shakespeare, who's then interpreting English history, and so I thought this is and then it's had a huge influence on me and you know what my artistic aesthetic, and it's, you know, especially now that I've started to direct my own films, I unabashedly, you know, credit Gus with influencing a lot of my taste, or at least the movies I'm interested in. And so it was a way to kind of step back in the other direction and just explore one step in Gus's process, because and it was fascinating to me because there are things that you can see, oh yeah, that made it into My Own Private Idaho. These like the two main characters, these wandering kind of characters, but that are similar to the Keanu and River characters, but in other ways are very different. And so it was a way to explore a kind of interim step, but also intermediary step, but also explore it in such a way that I'd be exploring it as a filmmaker, and that kind of makes you think in a different way too. Like, oh, really? He wanted to put that? Okay, how do you actually realize that? Not just as a scholar or a critic, but to actually try and take those steps. Makes you think about the process in a different way.
Fantastic. So this area, anyone got anything? Yes, ma'am. Yep. Sammy and Zelda?
She's asking about my cats, yes.
Okay. What's it like? So what's your favorite thing about directing? Was that it? Okay. And how are Sammy and Zelda, which I believe are cats?
Well, I've been acting for a decade and a half, and I still enjoy it. But I like other aspects of filmmaking as well, and so directing is it's just a chance to engage in the process from a different perspective and position, and it's also nice because as an actor, you have, you know, your main responsibility is your character, and you can turn over a lot of the other responsibilities to the director and other you know, artists and craftspeople in the film. So sometimes that's nice. Other times it's nice to be a director because you get to have a lot of those conversations with the other people that you don't have when you're an actor. So I really just enjoy those additional kinds of collaborations that happen on a film set and being a part of them when I direct a film. And my cats, Sammy and Zelda, are normally New York house cats, apartment cats, but I'm working in Detroit for quite a while, so we flew them to Detroit. Sammy got sick on the way, but now he's happily at home in Detroit.
Yep. I'll repeat it.
Yeah.
There's a rumor afoot that you may be directing an adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian.
Well, that was in the works. We shot a 20-minute test of it that turned out pretty well. We used Mark Pellegrino from the series Lost and Scott Glenn, and we had real horses and guns and blank ammo and everything, and it turned out really, really well, and we were, you know, gearing up to do the feature, but that, for various reasons, is on hold, but we are going to make a movie based on his third book, Child of God, which takes place in Tennessee.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Anyone over here? Yes, sir.
With homeless youth.
Gus, I'm just going to repeat the question.
Okay.
The gentleman is about to start a theater work with street kids, basically, right? And I'm sort of asking Gus's advice after giving him a very nice compliment about any advice you could give him about their comfort level and how that process worked.
Well, yeah, like our cast was made up of different types of there were a number of members of homeless youth members of the Portland streets, but they were sort of they kind of they already had a comfort level compared to maybe like some more destitute people that were around. I don't really feel like I was working directly with truly like homeless youth, but I've seen it done in Hollywood. There's a great theater that had a program. They were working with street kids, and it always seemed like the plays that I saw there always seemed like they had like huge comfort levels for that space, you know, for the theatrical space, and being able to work, you know, on stories or stories about their own lives. It was like a huge opportunity. So like their comfort level was like way greater, I thought, than say just a non-homeless like participant.
It's really cool. Someone over here? Yeah, in the back there, sir. In the Idaho film, one of the actors in the Super 8 film actually looks a bit like Keanu Reeves. Was that intentional? Yes. Sorry, the one who plays the Keanu Reeves character looks a bit like River Phoenix.
No. We didn't cast. We didn't have a casting session for that. The way that movie came about is there was a description of the characters and Gus's treatment. I guess after we made it, Gus told me that they were actually, those characters were based on real people he knew. One actor from his film Malanoche named Ray, and then this young kid he knew named George, who at a very young age, I guess, just had a huge personality. He had like a really kind of wisecracking, charming personality, and he was, I guess, like 12, but he'd try and pick up adult women, and he was kind of like this character from Robert Duvall's film Angela, My Love. And so I only learned that later after we made the movie. So I went to my good friend Yvette, and I knew that she had a son this age, and I just sometimes when I cast, you just feel like, you know what, I think this person will be right. I don't know if they're going to be a great performer, but I think they're just right, and I'll work with what I have. And so we went to Yvette, and then and asked her if Milan, her son, would be interested, and he said yes. And then he got his friend Sage to play the other role, and they were great. They I guess they got acting lessons from Leonardo DiCaprio. He gave them the advice that they should know all their lines, and they did. And I guess he ran lines with them, so they were all ready to go when we started filming. And I also learned something from it was something Gus said. I think just on one of his commentaries about Malanoches, especially also working with people that don't have a ton of acting experience, like just kind of work with what they can do and don't try and push them beyond what they can do naturally. And I think you said something like that. At least that's the way that I kind of work with performers that don't have a ton of experience, and just try and design the film and the way we shoot it and put the scenes together based on what they're able to do. And if they can't deliver like a soliloquy like Anthony Hopkins or something, don't ask them to do that. Film it in a different way. And Danny Boyle said something like that too when he was making Slumdog Millionaire and working with people that were acting for the first time. He just had to kind of design the scenes in such a way that if he needed to, he could cut around, or just make the scenes not so dependent on, you know, seasoned performers.
Fantastic. Someone from this area has a question? Yes, sir.
James, you have another installation coming up, I think. I was wondering if there's any details on that.
Yeah, I'd love to know, James, you apparently have an upcoming installation. What's that all about? And I'd love to also hear about the Douglas Gordon work as well.
You mean Rebel, that one? The one in Venice?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did another project that was also inspired by a film, in this case, Rebel Without a Cause. And I don't know, 10 or so years ago, I played James Dean. That was a very, in a biopic that was kind of a very earnest portrayal of James Dean in his life. I felt like there was still a lot of material there to mine, and not just about James Dean, but, you know, about Nicholas Ray in that film and the other actors involved in that film, Sal Mineo, Natalie Wood, Dennis Hopper. And, but I also felt like, you know, that film is so iconic, and those characters and those people are so iconic in that kind of story of delinquent youth in the suburbs has really been mined over the past 50, 60 years. And so that if we were going to approach it, we needed a new kind of approach. That maybe we shouldn't approach it from the film world. That maybe if we used people from the art world, it would kind of we'd have a fresh take on the material. And so we started thinking about first breaking it up and not remaking the movie, but using different aspects of it. So maybe scenes that were never shot that Nicholas Ray had in early versions of the film. Nicholas Ray was living at the Chateau Marmont in Bungalow 2 when he made the film, and that's where they did all the rehearsals. And there are plenty of stories about that, whether they're factual or just legends that have arose. Didn't really matter to us after a while. We thought, you know, the legends play just an important part in people's lives now than the real story as the real stories do. So maybe we'll explore that. There's, you know, all of the motorcycle and car culture that kind of surrounded James Dean and that. And so we'll explore that. And you know, there were all these kind of things that we could explore surrounding the movie. And so at first I was just going to do it in like five sections. And then we started thinking, all right, well, who's going to play Nicholas Ray? And we thought, well, Jim Jarmusch would be, you know, kind of good. He kind of has that style. Nick Ray was kind of his teacher when he was at NYU, and he was Nick Ray's assistant. But that would be like maybe the way to cast it if you were doing like an earnest kind of biopic. So then my producing partner, Vince Jolivet, said, well, he knew I loved the artist Paul McCarthy, and he said, well, what about Paul McCarthy, who looks nothing like Nicholas Ray and is nothing like Nicholas Ray? He said, what about Paul McCarthy? And at the time I thought, oh, I would never. How could I ever ask Paul to act in this, you know, little project? And then we started thinking, well, maybe if he wasn't just an actor, maybe we could ask him to help collaborate on the whole thing. So then we asked him, and he was into it. So then that led to the idea that, well, maybe each piece could be a collaboration. And so then, you know, I knew Douglas Gordon, and he again does, you know, work with film, but in the art world. And so I thought he'd be a perfect fit. And so we said, well, Douglas, why don't you work on the section that involves the scenes that were never shot? And then that led to, you know, him casting Henry Hopper, Dennis's son, because Dennis was in the original movie. And then Aaron Young, you know, I'd done a lot of pieces with motorcycles, so I thought, all right, well, he'd be, you know, a good person to work on the motorcycles and automobile stuff. And then Ed Ruscha, you know, is sort of like the godfather of the LA art world and this kind of the soul of the LA art world. And I thought, well, he'd be a great person to kind of help merge the art world and the film world. And then Harmony Korine is very good with delinquent youth. Like, he's the new incarnation of like somebody exploring like youth doing bad thing in the suburbs. And so we thought he'd be great to kind of reinterpret the switchblade fight from the original film. And so we brought all of them together, and it was great. The work turned out, you know, better than I could have ever hoped. We premiered part of the installation. So it's part video, part film, part sculpture, paintings. Ed did a painting, photographs. It kind of is everything, and for me, it was a great opportunity again to use film as a source, but to fracture it, to break it up, to use different kinds of displays and projection possibilities, and to break us away from, you know, just a single screen in a theater, to, you know, make it more interactive, to use it as an opportunity to explore film, but in a very different way.
Fantastic. We're going to have to stop it there. I just want to thank both of our guests. Gus Van Sant's Restless is opening theaters all across the world on Friday. James Franco and Gus Van Sant's Memories of Idaho is on till the end of the next weekend.
Okay.
Please check it out. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, guys. That was awesome.
Yeah, how do I buy that? Really?
You gonna buy it?
That's awesome.
Is it for sale?
Wait, there's another one. I want to buy those.
You gonna buy them all?